Good morning. About that, you get the one check. Huh? Just so we're talking about the slaughtering of the sacrifices that has been in the north. The sacrifice has been in the north, the slaughtering, and the north meaning directly parallel, directly corresponding to the altar. The altar, when you walk in, was on the left, on the south. So directly corresponding to that is the north, and that's where you have to slaughter, and that's where you have to receive the blood. So it says the Gemara on 48a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, third word. V'tzafona ba'ola heichaksiva. Where does it say the requirement for the north is found by the Ola offering? Right in the beginning of Vayikra. Vayikra begins, talks about the Ola offerings. So the 10th and 11th verses talk about the Ola offering, and there it talks about flock and cattle. So it is flock, and bakar is cattle. So it says, where does it say they have to do it in the north? In the 11th verse of the first chapter, Sifona. It has to be done in the north. However, that's talking about Ashkan ben Son, ben Bakar Minalon. That 11th verse is talking about the Son, the cattle. Sorry, the flock. How do you know that the cattle has to be slaughtered also in the north? Amar Kra, the im minatzon. The verse that precedes it has a vav. The im minatzon. Now, at least to me, a little unclear when I was looking at the zebxim, but before the 10th verse, the verses prior to the 10th verse do talk about cattle along with flock. So now you have the vav, that vav is comparing, it's called a hekish, it's contrasting, comparing the two sections of the Torah, the parts that deal with the cattle and the parts that deal with the flock. So once you have the vav that compares the two sections, that's the vav is in verse 10. In verse 11, you have the requirement of slaughtering in the north. So we're saying that we're learning the previous section from the former section. So in verse 11, it talks about the north. And there it's referring to the flock. Cattle is earlier in Vayikra. And the vav in the previous verse combines a section. What does it combine it for? It combines it to teach you that just like the flock has to be slaughtered in the north, so too the cattle has to be slaughtered in the north, because earlier it doesn't say where to slaughter the animals. That's only over here in verse 11. But in verse 11, it only talks about the flock and not the cattle. So that vav in the previous verse combines the two sections to teach you that that even the cattle has to be slaughtered in the north. So Amar Kra ve'im min hatzon, the vav mosif al inyan rishon. The vav adds on to the first topic, meaning it compares the two sections. V'yilamed elyon mitachto. So literally, elyon and tachton is higher and lower, but in this case, it means really previous and former. So elyon is higher up, meaning it's earlier on. So you're learning the earlier part, which is the cattle. Mitachton, the later part, which is referring to the slaughtering in the north. Okay, so that's that. Now, as usual, this idea that the previous sections can learn from the former sections is also not so clear. So that's two opinions. Can you learn things like that when you have a comment, when you have a vav connecting things? Can you learn the previous verses from the next verses? Meaning, classically, when you have a vav most of inyan rishon, it's telling you that you have a section, tells you something, and then you have a vav. So the later section can learn halachas from the previous section because the vav connects it. That's a classic case. You have, let's say, a bunch of laws in the first 10 verses, then you have a vav. So then you learn that not only those laws apply to the first section, they can even apply to the second section. But here we're doing it in the reverse order. We're saying that the laws that apply in the later section actually apply to the previous section. And that is not so clear. So if you don't agree to that, so then how do you know the requirement of slaughtering cattle in the north. We only know by flock. So, the Tanya, let's bring a brisa that's going to potentially show us that not everyone agrees to this. So, it says, okay, so it says in another part of Vayikra, it says in the 5th chapter, there's 2 sections that are back to back. One section talks about me'ila, when you misuse, talking about inadvertently misuse something that's holy, then you have to bring a korban and pay a 5th. That's called classically me'ila. There's a whole tractate about it. We'll see hopefully before 2027. Yeah. So that's it. The next section talks about something called an asham tali. Asham tali is when you bring a sacrifice for potentially you're doubtfully committed something that's wrong. You weren't sure if the piece was forbidden fats or not. You just don't know. So you bring an asham tali, a guilt offering, which depends if you did the wrong thing. You're not sure. You doubtfully committed a prohibition. That's called an asham tali. Now those 2 sections are connected by a vav. The Tanya, it says v'im nefesh. It says v'im nefesh. Yeah, it says v'im nefesh, which is connecting the section of me'ila to the section of asham tali. Why does it do that? L'chayiv al safek me'ilos asham tali. Let divrei Rabbi Akiva v'chanan potrim. So, what happens if you're not sure if something is holy? You're not sure if it has sanctity, and you misused it. Used it for your own benefit. You got confused which animal was the one you're going to use for your offering, and you ended up using it for your own personal benefit. And you don't know, and now all the animals died, or whatever it is. You have no idea, no way to find out. So, Rabbi Akiva says, for doubtfully misusing something which is holy, you have to bring an offering. And the Chachamim say you don't. Okay, so what are these 2 opinions arguing about? So at first glance, the Gemara thinks, oh, what we just mentioned, are they not arguing about this idea that when you have a vav connecting, can a previous section learn from a former section? Mar Savar Lemedin. Master says you could learn, and therefore the whole section of Asham Talui, of the doubtful guilt offering, will apply to the previous section of Me'ila. That's one opinion. Umar Savar Ein Lemedin. And the other one says, no, you cannot learn from, we don't do those kind of, we don't connect. The fact that a vav connects something, but it does not teach you the former parsha to the previous parsha. It only goes the other way. It can't teach you what stated later on to earlier. So that would be a very good, we see that there's 2 opinions about this idea, and therefore our question of the Gemara is valid. Sorry. Our question is valid, that how do you know that the cattle has to be slaughtered in the north? So if we reject this now and prove to you that everyone agrees to this idea that a previous section could be learned from a former section, then we don't have our question anymore. So that's what the Gemara is about to do. Amar of Papa, the Kule Amal Lamed. No, it's not true. When you have a vav connecting sections, you can learn halachas from the latter section to the previous section. You could do that. Okay, well, once you do that, then what are Rabbi Akiva and the Chama arguing about? And this is really parenthetical to us. We really want to know, how do you know that cattle is slaughtered in the north? And we said that only works if you can learn from a later section to a previous section that you can slaughter the cattle in the north. If not, then you need a new source. So right now we're parenthetically explaining the debate between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim, but really we have to get back to our section. So just Amar of Papa, the Kudam made, and everyone agrees that you could learn laws from a later section to a previous section. Fine. If that's true, so why do the Rabbanan say that you are exempt when you violated Me'ila, when you misused something holy? Doubtfully. You're not sure if you misused it or not. Shouldn't they obligate you in bringing an Asham offering the way everything else? If you're not sure if you ate forbidden fats, you have to bring an Asham offering, an Asham Tali. So here to us. So says the Gemara, basically, you're right. They have another place where they learn the exemption. Comparing this section to the sin offering that you bring if you ate forbidden fats inadvertently. Says the Gemara, we have Xer Shava. that in order to be liable, you have to be similar to forbidden fats. Forbidden fats is something which, if you do it advertently, person's chayav kares. Inadvertently, they're liable a sin offering. So too, by an asham kalui, by the guilt offering that you bring for things that are in doubt, it has to be something which you'd be liable kares for. If you're not sure you committed an aveira that you're liable kares for, then you can bring this doubt asham offering. But me'ilah, misusing sanctified property, is not something which you're liable kares for. So therefore, if you're not sure that you misused an animal that's holy, you would not bring this offering. Remember, this offering is called asham toli. It's an offering brought for something which you're not sure if you committed the aveira or not. It's doubtful. We're not sure. So does that have any limitations to it? So the Rabbanim say, yeah, it does have a limitation to it. It's only something, and if you do it advertently, you're liable kares. And inadvertently, you're liable a sin offering. Only then, when you are not sure if you did it, then you bring this thing called the asham kali, the doubtful sin offering, the doubtful guilt offering. That's all good for the Rabbanim. Rabbi Akiva, he also learns Xer Shava, but for something else. Malaholan bekvua, afkan bekvua. So just like the chelav offering is kavua, meaning it's something which is it's the same animal no matter if you're poor or you're rich. It's a set animal. So too here you have to bring something which is set. La'afuke chatas betumas mikdash v'kadashav the ola b'yoredu. But according to Rabbi Akiva, the Xer Shava doesn't come to eliminate anything which is not liable kares for. No, it comes to teach you that you're always going to be liable to bring this doubtful guilt offering. If you did something where you're not sure if you're liable or not, it's just coming to exclude one thing. Any offering that when you're liable to bring it, it's called the Ola V'Yored, and you can bring an offering depending on your financial status, that's going to be excluded. So when you go into the temple without realizing that you are impure, so there the offering is a korban Ola V'Yored, meaning literally up and down, meaning it depends how wealthy you are. If you're very wealthy, you'll bring a nice offering, a nice animal. If you're poor, you'll bring a flour offering. So each opinion agrees that you learn from chelav a Xer Shava. The question is, what's it coming to teach you? According to the Rabbanan, it's very limited. The only time you're ever going to bring a doubtful sin offering is when you do something that's liable kares, but you're not sure, like forbidden fats. I'm not sure if this piece was a forbidden fat, and I have no way of knowing. I've already eaten it, and no one knows. What do you do now? Bring it asham talui. According to Rabbi Akiva, it's very inclusive. It sounds it includes almost everything except for one section of sacrifices that are not set in stone, the ones that vary depending on your financial status. Okay. So now, what do the Rabbanan do with that? Say the Rabbanan, ein Xer Shava l'mechza. The Rabbanan say it doesn't make sense. Once you're learning from chelav to us, you can't play halvesies. You can't split. Meaning either learn it the whole way or don't learn it at all. You can't learn it halfway. So you can't learn that, we're only going to take out one part of chelav. It's interesting because everyone agrees that a Xer Shava is only something that you receive from your Rebbe. You can't make up a Xer Shava on your own. You have to receive it from your Rebbe, who received from his Rebbe. It's a tradition going back to. So it's interesting. You could have thought that your Rebbe taught you that the Xer Shava is only for one detail. But apparently that doesn't make sense. That goes against what Xer Shava is. The Xer Shava can't be split. If the Torah compared two parshas with the method of a Xer Shava, it compared them completely. So if you're learning from a chelav, the forbidden fats, you can't only take out one thing that is a set offering. You have to take the whole package that is referring to anything which is chayav kares, not just that it's a set offering. So that's why the rabbis don't hold of this, because ein Xer Shava l'mechza. Now the Gemara assumes that Rabbi Akiva is not going to argue on that. They don't have a debate. Can you take a Xer Shava halfway or not? So Rabbi Akiva Nami, he agrees. Ein Xer Shava l'mechza. Says Gemara, you're right. You're right. Everyone agrees you can't take a Xer Shava and take out one detail. So then, what do they argue about? So this is what they argue about. Now, they're going to argue like this. On the one hand, you have a vav. The vav compares the section of doubtful guilt offering, asham tali, to the previous section of me'ila, of misusing sanctified property, right? And that vav compares the two, which in Gemara language we call a hekesh, a comparison, to teach you something. That would teach you that you would be obligated to bring a doubtful guilt offering if you're not sure if you misused holy property. That's what the hekesh would teach you. On the other hand, you have Gzeira Shava that teaches you that it has to be like chela, like forbidden fats. And forbidden fats are only something, or chayiv kares. So the Gzeira Shava teaches you that only something which you're liable kares for, if you're not sure if you did it or not, then you bring the doubtful guilt offering. So you have a contradiction. If you go with the hekesh, it teaches you that you're chayiv to bring an offering for me'ilah. If you go with the Gzeira Shava, so then it teaches you, then you would not bring an offering by me'ilah. Says the Gemara, maybe that's the debate. Which one takes precedence? When you have such a contradiction. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva Savrim Nefesh Ksiv, Vav Motel Rishon, Rabbanami, Aksiv Vim Nefesh. Rabbi Kiva says, look, the Vav compares the two. The Rabbanan also agree the Vav compares the two sections. Okay, but here's what they argue about. Demar Savar Hekesh Adif, Rabbi Kiva holds that really when you have a Hekesh or a Gzeira Shava, a Hekesh window, it's a stronger exposition, it's a stronger form of derivation. You know, when we say the Yud Gimel Midos every morning and someone's a Scottish after, you could wonder, are they all equal? Are all 13 ways to expound the Torah equal? Or when you have a contradiction between the two, does one take precedence? Here we learn, at least at this point, that a Hekesh, that they argue about, what's stronger? A Hekesh, that's Rabbi Akiva, and therefore you're liable to bring a offering for misusing sanctified property. Umar Savar, Gzeira Shava. And the Rabbanan agree that no, Gzeira Shava is that takes precedence. And that would be the debate. A fundamental dispute when you have a contradiction, Hekesh versus Gzeira Shava. I remember, if I remember correctly, there are Rishonim that learn that a Hekesh is another form of Gzeira Shava. It's interesting. We never mentioned Hekesh in the 13 ways the Torah is derived, right? So I remember looking it up once. I think it's a dispute. Is Hekesh its own thing or it's a form of Gzeira Shava? If it's a form of Gzeira Shava, so it's an interesting thing that, I guess these two forms of one category, one's stronger than the other. Either way, the Gemara rejects it, don't worry. And it says, look, the Kuli Alma, the Hekesh Adif. Everyone agrees that a Hekesh is actually stronger. When you have two parts that are compared to each other, that's stronger than an open word here and an open word there to teach you laws. If that's true, so then everyone should agree you should be liable for a doubtful guilt offering if you are not sure if you've misused sanctified property. So if that's true, why did the rabbi say you are exempt? The Amir Lach Rabbanan, Tachton Hu de Gamra Me'elyon, La'asham, the Kesef Shkalim. The Rabbanan say, you're right, the sections are compared, but they're compared for something else. They're compared to teach you that just like a Asham offering, one second, Taktan Hu de Gomer Elyon, so meaning the later parsha of the doubtful guilt offerings, how much do you have to spend on an offering? So maybe you would have thought you have to spend the minimal amount. That the Gemara says, no, you learn from Me'ilah that you have to spend kesef shkolim, at least 2 shekels for your offering. Why would you need that derivation? What would you have thought? You would have thought that logically a doubtful sin offering, guilt offering, shouldn't cost more money than a definite sin offering. A definite sin offering is cheap. Baz danka it's a sixth of a dinner, a very small amount. So you would have thought that for sure, if for a sin offering it's so cheap, a sixth of a dinner, for sure for a doubtful guilt offering it should be just as cheap. To that we need the comparison of the section to teach you that no, by a doubtful guilt offering, it's going to have the same minimum requirement as the section of Me'ilah, and therefore you have to it's going to cost you 2 shkalim. Okay, Now, Rabbi Akiva, who learns the comparison to teach you that you're liable on offering, how does he know that there's a minimal requirement? The assumption is that he agrees with that. That for the doubtful guilt offering, you have to pay a minimum of 2 shkalim. Hai svara minale. Where does he learn out this svara, that this idea you have to, that it costs a minimal amount? Naftalei mitzos toras asham. Toras achas lekol hashamos. So by the sections of the different sacrifices, it often says, and this is the section of the asham. Toras here means the category of the section. So why does the Torah state that this is the section of the asham? To tell you there's one rule for all the guilt offerings. Just like the Me'ila guilt offering cost 2 shkalim, all of the asham offerings are going to cost 2 shkalim. Even the doubtful guilt offerings, they're all going to have one law. Says the Gemara, okay, but that itself is a debate if you interpret the word Torah like that. So, Teinach man disle Torah, upon the lesson Torah, make a gomer. If you don't have Torah, if you don't learn it that way, so where do you learn this halacha that it needs to be 2 shkalim? Gomar be'erkecha be'erkecha. You have a Gzeira Shava from our section. From our section to the section of Me'ila that teaches you be'erkecha. It has to be of a certain value, and that value is 2 shkalim. So, okay. So says the Gemara, okay, but that's very good where the Torah states in the guilt offerings the word erkecha. Its value. Its value, when it says its value, it can refer to 2 shkalim. But not every guilt offering has that word, its value, but erkecha, according to its value, which we learn to mean 2 shkalim. For example, but asham shivcha charufa delok sebe be'erkecha michael meivar. Shivcha charufa is a maidservant who's half free and half servant. So her marriage is not a real marriage. Someone has relations with her. You have to bring an asham. You have to bring an asham, a guilt offering. There, it doesn't say the word be'erkecha. It doesn't say that you have to bring according to its value. So you don't know that asham is going to cost 2 shkalim. So what do? Gomar ba'ayil ba'ayil. There's another Gzeira Shava which teaches you the word ayil. And just like in one place, the word ayil, the deer, how do you translate it? Deer? Ram. Ram. Just like a ram. So just like a ram is going to be 2 shkalim over there, so to over here to be 2 shkalim. So at the end of the day, we wanted to know, how do you know that the cattle is slaughtered in the north for an ola offering? It only states it by the flock. The Gemara suggested that it's because of this comparison of the 2 sections. To that, the Gemara thought to question such exposition. The Gemara says, no, at the end of the day, Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis don't argue about that. Everyone agrees that when you have a comparison between 2 sections, the earlier section could learn from the later section. That's fine. In the middle, we learned that basically there's a debate by if you misuse sanctity. If you're not sure if you misuse sanctity, are you liable in offering or not? So that debate was revolving around when you compare the 2 sections, Me'ila and a doubtful guilt offering, what do you compare it for? One compares it to teach you that you bring an offering, and one compares it that that offering of a doubtful guilt offering is going to cause 2 shkalim. And then we just showed you that across the board, the guilt offerings are all going to cost 2 shkalim. Whether it's because the word Torah teaches you that, or because of other Gzeira Shavas, at the end of the day, everyone agrees that an asham offering is always going to cost 2 shkalim. As opposed to a chatas offering, which is going to cost much less. Cost less. Okay, fine. That's that. Chatos minalon debayi tzafon. How do I know? That's by an ola offering. How do I know that a sin offering is also slaughtered in the north, which is right corresponding to where the altar is? Dichsev v'shachat es hachatas b'makom ha'ola. You slaughter the chatas in the place of the ola. It's interesting to me that it didn't mention you slaughter in the north. Oh. It's parallel after the ola. Meaning the ola says do it in the north. The chata says do like the ola. Why not just say do it in the north? I don't know. But it's just interesting food for thought. Yeah. Can't fall asleep when you think about this. You get an answer, let me know. So Eshkan Shchita Kabbalah. Okay, that's very good for slaughtering, but we learned in the Mishnah that even the receiving of the blood has to be done in the north. Kabbalah minalon. How do you know that you receive blood in the north? That the Kohen receives the blood from the blood of the Chatos. So, okay, he has to receive the blood. So, it sounds like in the same place that it's slaughtered. Yeah. Says the Gemara, well, hold on. Who told you he has to be standing in the north? Maybe he could be standing close to the south and just stretch out his hand, and that'll be in the north. Who said that he has to be standing in the north? Maybe he could be standing in the south and stretches out his hand. That the Gemara says, Amar Kra Vilakach. So interesting derivation here. Vilakach. There's a vav and a lamed, which if you flip it will be lo kach. Lo means to him, he has to take. He himself has to be there in the north receiving the blood. Okay. So he has to slaughter in the north, and he has to be standing in the north when receiving the blood. Ashkechon the mitzvah la'akev minayin.
Now we found out direction north. Get confirmation of north.
Now what?
What you just said.
Right, that he has to be standing there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. He has to be standing in the north. Okay, but once again, you would have thought that's only ideal. That's like for the mitzvah. How do you know if he doesn't stand in the north and he stands in the south, but reaches out his hand into the north and receives it like that? How do you know that that's not good at all? That that's going to be an invalidation? There's always two things: the ideal, and if you don't do it, is it invalidation? So, okay, so let's see. Ashkan lemitzvah min lakaminayin. There's another verse that says, the verse is by the he-goat offering of the nasi who makes a mistake. If the leader makes a mistake, right? Like we learned in Horios, and people follow him, you have to bring a sacrifice. So in that section it says, "V'shachar oso b'makom asher yishchas ola." Once again, he has to slaughter the offering where, in the place that the ola offering is slaughtered. Okay, Vitanya, the Brisa says, "Heichan ola nishkata." Where is the ola slaughtered? Bitzafon, in the north. Avzeh bitzafon. This also in the north. Turning the page. Okay, so now that's how you learn it. Now, hold on. This offering that we just learned is the source that a sin offering is invalid if it's not slaughtered in the north. It's in one section. It's by the offering of the nasi, the leader. If he makes a mistake, an erroneous mistake, so then he has to bring a chatas. Now, and we're learning that to all sin offerings, there's going to be invalidation if you don't slaughter in the north. On that, the Gemara says, who said? Maybe there's a unique thing by the leader's offer, by the nasi's offering, by the leader, and you can't apply it everywhere else. You're learning it from here. Why do you have to learn from the nasi's offering? Doesn't it say it over here? So now the Gemara is going to speak this all out. So in the place where you shek the ola, shek the chatos. Why does it have to repeat it again by the nasi? So why is it excluded and singled out? To set its place. And if you don't slaughter in the north, it's going to be invalid. That's why you think it's excluded, to teach you that you have to slaughter sin offerings in the north. Maybe the Torah repeats the obligation to slaughter the sin offering. It repeats it by the nasi, by the leader, because maybe only his sin offering has to be in the north, and if not, it's invalid. But anybody else's doesn't have to be in the north. Talmud Lomar, v'shachar asachatas b'makom ha'ola. It repeats to tell you now. Okay, now this pasuk is by a regular sin offering, and it's talking about smicha, leaning on the animal, and it compares and it says v'shachar asachatas b'makom ha'ola. It compares a chatas to an ola again. So why? To teach you zeh bana'av. This is the general rule. Lekol chataos. All the sin offerings, shihihiyu to unos tafon. They all have to be slaughtered in the north. But they all have to be slaughtered in the north. Says the Gemara. But hold on. Eshkechan sayir nasi bein lemitzvah bein liake. Shar chataos nami eshkechan lemitzvah la'akev minolam. So the Gemara says one thing. It only repeats it. It only repeats it by the nasi's offering. So I understand from there that his offering, without it being in the north, is not going to be valid. Everywhere else, I learned it has to be ideally in the north. But how do I know that if not, it's invalid? Dichsiv, it says bekispa, uksiv b'se'ira. So it says by the regular offering of a person, it says, one second. Yeah, Rashi explains that basically it says that when it comes to two offerings, it repeats it. Whether it talks about the female sheep and the female goat, and it says it by both of them. Why does it say by both of those sections you have to slaughter them in the place that you slaughter the chatas, in the place where you slaughter the ola? It repeats it twice in that section. It says by the seir, by the female goat. It says slaughter in the place you slaughter the ola, and then 4 verses later it says slaughter the female sheep in the place that you slaughter the ola. Why does it do that? So to teach you that the second time it repeats it is to teach you that it's not coming to teach it for itself, because that you know already. It must be coming to teach you that it is absolutely necessary. So the reason why I repeat by an individual sin offering, you have to slaughter in the same place as the north to teach you that if you don't do it, it's going to prevent meaning it's going to be a preventative. It's going to be an invalidation if you don't do it. Okay. Fine. So the repetition 4 verses later is the place that you know that if you don't slaughter it there, it's going to be invalid. Now, what's going to happen now is basically when we mentioned the offering of the nasi, of the leader who makes a mistake, it says v'shachat oso, should slaughter it in the place that the ola slaughtered, slaughtering it. So the question is, it's coming to exclude what? And this is going to take us for a while. What is it coming to exclude? So says the Gemara, Ella oso lamali. What is the word oso? So now meaning we finished learning that a chatas offering has to be in the north, and if not, it's invalid. In the middle, we mentioned a verse that the leader, the nasi, who makes an erroneous mistake, he has to bring a chatas. Okay, he has to bring a sin offering. In that section, it says he should bring oso, he should bring it. It usually comes to exclude something, it and not something else. So, Ella oso lamali. What do you need oso for? For the following brisa. Says the Gemara, oso b'tzafon. It has to be in the north. Okay, but they all have to be in the north. The ein seir nachshon b'tzafon. Seir nachshon is a way to refer to the sacrifices that were brought as the inauguration of the tabernacle. Nachshon was the leader of the tribe of Yehuda. So it's called the seir nachshon. So the seir nachshon does not need to be slaughtered in the north. Okay, so that's what's coming to exclude. Fine. Vitanya, and says the Brisa v'samach yado al rosh seir, that in that section of the nasi's sin offering, it says you should place your hands al rosh seir, on the head of the seir, lirabos, to include seir nachshon l'smicha, that the seir nachshon, the offering, the higo that's brought by the princes, the nesiim, when they inaugurated the tabernacle, they have to lean on the animal. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer l'rabos seirei avodas kochabim l'smicha. No, it's really coming to include that the offerings that are brought for an erroneous act of idolatry, those need smicha. Okay, so now you would have thought. So now back to our oso. Why does oso come to exclude slaughtering the prince's inaugural offering? It comes to exclude its slaughtering in the north. Why would you have thought it's included? That you have to have a verse to exclude it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, since you've included the inaugural prince offering for leaning, you would have thought maybe it's also included that it has to be slaughtered in the north. Kamash Malan, that comes to teach us. Oso teaches you that only this offering, the Nasi's offering, is in the north, coming to exclude the prince's inaugural offerings. And that's the first attempted answer. What Oso is coming to do, coming to exclude the prince's offering that is not in the north, does not have to be in the north. Why would you have thought to exclude it? Since it's included for one thing, such as leaning, you thought it's included for other things as well, to which the Torah tells you, no, it's excluded. Okay, but don't worry, that's going to be rejected right now. Masket Ravina, so says Ravina, Hanichel Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, that was Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda included the inaugural prince offering for leaning. So you would have thought maybe also for shechting in the north. But according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that we're including the offering when we commit we erroneously commit avodah zarah. So the verse teaches us that has to be leaned on. According to Rabbi Shimon, why do you have to have the verse oso to exclude? What's it coming to exclude? And don't tell me it's coming to exclude the inaugural prince offering. I would have never thought it was going to be included because I don't include it for leaning. So he says, hold on, you're making an assumption. You're making an assumption that for Rabbi Yehuda, from the fact that we include leaning, you would think to include slaughtering. Who told you that's true? Because something's including for one detail of a leaning on the offering, you would automatically think it's included for slaughtering? Rabbi Yehuda, minicha. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's also a question. Just because I include the prince offering for leaning, I would have thought to include it for slaughtering in the north. Why would I thought that? Whatever it's included for, it's included for. And whatever it's excluded for, it's excluded for. And maybe you'll tell me, if I didn't have the verse, so coming to exclude, Hava Amina, Tesi b'binyanav, I would have learned that everything should be included, and everything should be included with a binyanav, with a general binyanav that all sin offerings are in the north. So even the prince's offering would be in the north. Says the Gemara, well, if you're going after a binyanav, where you can look at the general sin offering and pattern this one after the general sin offering, then why did you have to have an extra verse including leaning on the prince's offering? That's also something which, if you look around the sin offerings, you'll see that they all require leaning. So why do you have to have an extra verse to come and teach you that leaning is a necessity? Imkain smicha gufa teisei mibinyanav. Let smicha itself be learned out of the binyanav. So what are you going to say? The reason why I can't learn is because the inaugural prince offering was only for that time. It was only for that moment, right? There wasn't an inaugural tabernacle offering every year, every time. It was a one-time event. So why do I have to have a special verse to come to teach you that you must lean on the inaugural prince offering? Because midoros lo garminan. I can't learn from offerings that are brought for all generations, such as your average sin offering. Those are things that are for generations, midoros. So a momentary offering, temporary offering just for that one moment in time cannot be learned out from doros. So if that's true, so hachanami midoros lo garminan. So then so too, I wouldn't think that I could learn that it has to be slaughtered in the north either, because I'm not patterning myself after it being slaughtered. I can't pattern the inaugural prince offering after any other offering that is permanent and not temporary. If that's true, I would never have thought that I should include in the prince offering the requirement to slaughter in the north, because I cannot pattern something which is temporary for something which is permanent. And since the inaugural prince offering was a temporary thing, it was just for that period in time, I cannot pattern it after anything that's meant for all times. Okay, so if that's true, back to the drawing board, what does the word oso come to teach you? The elo oso b'tzafon, the ein shochet b'tzafon. Maybe you'll say that the word oso teaches you oso b'tzafon, that it has to be in the north, the ein shochet b'tzafon. But the one who slaughtered it does not need to be standing in the north. He could lean his hand and slaughter it. So maybe you'll say that for slaughtering, the animal has to be in the north, but you can position yourself technically in the southern part, and you can lean your hand into the north and slaughter it then. Okay, that was an attempt. But that we say, hold on, shochet, the idea of the slaughter where he has to be, that's mid Rabbi Achia nafka. We learn that out from Rabbi Achia. What does he say? The Tanya Rabbi Achia Omer v'shachano so al yarach hamazbeach tzafona, that you have to slaughter it. Our verse that teaches you to slaughter in the north, it says v'shachano so al yarach hamazbeach tzafona. Ma Talmud Lomer, what's it coming to teach you? Lefi shematzinu omed b'tzafon umekabel b'tzafon v'im amad b'dar mekibel b'tzafon pasol. Just like we learned that when you receive the blood, if you're standing in the south and leaning your hands into the north, it's invalid. So Yachol Avzeh, you would have thought this also should be invalid if you're standing in the south and slaughtering in the north. Talmud Lomar, Oso b'tzafon, ve'ein hashochet b'tzafon. So this verse comes to teach you that the animal has to be in the north, and you don't have to be in the north. So we already learned that requirement from this section of the Torah, the 11th verse in the book of Vayikra. We don't need the leaders, the Nasis offering. That word oso must be teaching me something else, because this we know already. So third attempt, ela oso b'tzafon ve'ein ben oth b'tzafon. The animal has to be in the north, but not the bird. The bird, you can do malika, not in the north. The Tanya Yachol Yeh ben oth talon tzafon v'dinhu. You'd have thought the bird, and with this, has to be in the north, and it's logical. Why would you have thought so? Uma ben son shelo kabalo kohen. Just like when it comes to the animals, when it comes to the flock, a non-Kohen could slaughter it, and yet that's a leniency, and yet it has a stringency. It has to be in the north. Ben oath, the bird, which has a stringency that only a Kohen could do malika, shekabel Kohen. So for sure, it should have the stringency of having a set place. Eino din shekabel tzafon. Is it not logical that if it's more stringent because a Kohen has to do it, it should also be more stringent and require a set place? Talmud Lomer oso. And that the Torah has to teach you that only the animal has to be in the north, but the malika can be done not in the north. Yeah, okay, we'll stop here.
But the malika has to be done by a Kohen.
By a Kohen, yeah. They're not in the north. Okay, we'll continue from there.
Yeah.